After the recent last chance qualifiers, it was concluded by many that this Indian player was the star of the show. It felt like he could handle every single brawler and every matchup perfectly, filling out any roles he has to play, and was just a mechanical demon.
Into a tough spot here. Sergeant goes back on himself, but gets the kill. A huge play.
And he was renowned as the Indian Shatampo by many, which is a funny nickname to have. But where did this Indian demon come from, and how did he steal the show in the LCQs? Well, let's start from the beginning of 2020, where Sergeant began his competitive career. But before going onwards, I would like to shout out Peri, who is the analyst for Revenant, as I was able to get in touch with Sergeant and ask him a few questions. So first of all, the name SergeantClash was actually inspired by YouTubers like Chief Pat. And funny enough, he chose the name Clash over Brawl, which is ironic. But I guess Clash Royale and Clash of Clans were the bigger games back in the days. But since the dawn of Brawl Stars, he's been a top player in India, and competitive Brawl Stars just naturally came in contact with him. And at that time, Sergeant was playing under a free agent team named FA Tryhards. What a tough name, you know? Anyways, his first year didn't go the best for him, as he would fail to qualify for multiple monthly finals. But keep in mind that he has to play on APAC servers, as there wasn't an India server back in the days. However, in 2021, Brawl Stars added a Southeast Asia and South Asia region. And in this region, Sergeant will face off with the 2020 World Champions, Coupe d'Ace and Response. And in their first face-off, it was honestly a close fight, as Team Flash were just barely able to squeeze by 3-2. But in that year, I don't know why these Indian rosters kept on changing their players. And by the end of the season, their point distribution kind of got ruined, and none of them were able to qualify to Worlds. But it doesn't matter, as the young Sergeant showed great potential in every single match. And in 2022, he was picked up by none other than Coupe d'Ace and Response. The two Singaporeans betted on Sergeant to be the X Factor, and these three will go on to dominate the season. And by domination, I mean it, as they won 7 out of the 7 monthly finals held that year. It just seemed like this region was too easy for them. And in August of that year, all 3 of them would be signed to Starward Esports, which was Sergeant's first ever organization. And Starward will qualify to that year's World Finals, and it will be Sergeant's first ever time on the big stage. Well, never mind, the visa strikes again. Visa issues were always common amongst the Indians, and Sergeant will be no different. And without Sergeant, Starward would almost experience a clean sweep in their first round, losing 3-0 against Team Queso and only winning 1 of the 7 games played. It was a disappointing showing for the CISA region, but Sergeant will come back even stronger in 2023. Due to the addition of the India region, Sergeant will team up with Chashant, Prime, and Response to compete in a newly added region. Although their performances weren't as dominant as last year, they were still able to win 4 out of the 6 monthly finals held in 2023. However, Brawl Stars decided to add the last chance qualifiers. And since India was a small region, the winners will qualify to LCQs, meaning that Sergeant and friends will be heading to Katowice. By the way, the 4 of them were signed under Revenant in 2023. And going into LCQs, no one expected Revenant to come on top. But if I keep it a buck, the LCQ teams that year was kind of weak. Compared to the teams participating in the most recent LCQs, the 2023 edition seemed to include teams of a lower level. And luckily for Revenant, they were not drawn to one of the strong teams in the group stage. SK Gaming, Stamina, and Navi were the 3 big dogs of the LCQ, and Revenant were placed in a group without any of them. Group C included Revenant, Humble, Datos Free Agents, and Rising Sun Esports, and it was by far the weakest group out of the 4. In their first match against Rising Sun, Sergeant showed great aim on the bell, but more importantly, I will focus on his game IQ. Although he was able to manage his lane against the Meg, he notices the Lola struggling against the RT, and Sergeant decided to switch the lane with the Lola to neutralize the range advantage. And that lane switch worked perfectly for Revenant, as they were able to go on to win 2-0 against Rising Sun. And right here on Game 2, this body block was another showing of great game IQ, as Sergeant was the one with a lower star count, him dying would be better than his teammates dying. This debut match from Revenant was very promising, and they would advance to the winner's bracket, where they would face Datos Free Agents, and the first game was simply a Revenant domination, as all 3 of Revenant's players would hold their lane down and it seemed like Datos just couldn't break through. And Sergeant on the Piper in the middle lane was exceptionally amazing. He was able to control the tempo of the game and prevent any advancement from the South Americans. However, in the second set, the South Americans played a much better game, capitalizing off a mistake from Response.
Response not dodging in time. Sergeant taking a lot of damage. Gonna be very low speed now as well, and luckily for Datos, they managed to save it. And Dallas FA will take the set, even things out.
The sets were now tied 1-1. And going into set 3, the draft from Revenant was a super aggressive combo. With Sam and El Primo, Revenant were choosing to go all in on the offense. But Datos just seemed to neutralize every single attack from Revenant. Many attempts were made, but they were all denied by the South Americans. However, in the final moments of the game, this one played by Sergeant changed everything.
Jump in from Sergeant, now the pass, and it's beautiful!
And going into game 2, Sergeant made a pass to himself, and as the game went on, Datos just weren't able to bring it back, and Revenant advances to the golden ticket match.
That is gonna be GG's well played. RevenantXSpark are gonna be your #1 seed in Group C.
Since Stamina, Na'Vi and SK are top the group, it means that Revenant were not going to face any of the big teams. Instead, they were drawn to revenantXSpark, the second seed of Group A. And in the first set, the South Americans were looking strong, securing a team wipe in overtime to take the first set.
Which is definitely problematic pass to Chaser, and that is gonna be the goal coming through Reconic.
In set 2, both teams were fighting for the mind control, but Revenant were the ones to start the countdown, and barely takes a set. And in set 3, Revenant were down by a few percentage as the timer ticks down. Revenant needed just a little bit of damage to take the set, and when they needed him the most, the Indian Shatampo always delivers.
Let's get behind it. He gets the kill. Sergeant could be on the save, and he could be getting damaged. 1% is all that's in it. He finds it in the final seconds, and it should be enough. RevenantXSpark. Oh my goodness me! What did you just do?
With that momentum, Sergeant will only play better on set 4. This guy was simply dancing in the zone and juking out shots, winning a 2v1 when it mattered the most. It was that match point for Revenant. And with just 32 HP, Sergeant somehow managed to survive, securing his ticket to Paris.
And it's gonna be Sergeant, the man himself, that locks it in for Revenant. They are going to the World Finals.
In the World Finals, Revenant were drawn to Group A, alongside Luminosity and BC Gaming. And in their first encounter with Luminosity, they were beaten 3-1. And well, it's not the worst of performances, as this LG team were quite strong. However, this loss means that Revenant had to win against BC in order to keep their season going. And starting the match off, Revenant did play a good set. They identified the double heal come from BC and kept the distance away, allowing them to grab the early lead. However, the Chinese were then able to grab both set 2 and 3, and Revenant were now on the brink of losing.
Up the defense, it's a very small differential between the two teams, just 6%. OU has to push through. Engine with no gadgets in sight, 5 seconds remaining, and RevenantXSpark have all the defense in the world, raining down on BC and denying the match point.
Set 5, baby, another one.
And this time, it was Response who clutched up when it mattered.
Damage, that's all right. Oh, you're kidding, Response.
Well, that's the world champ difference, I guess. And with that win, Revenant will knock BC back to China and advances to day 3. But unfortunately, they were drawn to Bobby Stamina, who were on such a godly run that year. They lost 3-1 to Stamina and were knocked out of the World Finals.
Will it happen? Will Revenant get the reset? Or is the India dream over? India are going home, STMN! And North America proceed!
However, a quarters finish for his first World Finals ain't that bad. But in 2024, this year was kind of a blip for Sergeant. Since BSC decided to shut down the South Asia region, Sergeant was forced to play in APAC, which had crazy ping for him. In 2024, he teamed up with Kenji and Terry, and although all 3 of them were good players, the team chemistry just did not click. They finished their year as 6th place in APAC and were unable to qualify for LCQs. But in 2025, Sergeant will team back up with Response, and they also picked up X9J as their 3rd. The 3 of them were signed into RevenantXSpark and will completely dominate Southeast Asia. They were pretty much first in every single month and will qualify to the Brawl Cup. But if you were there for the Brawl Cup, you would know that Sergeant was defeated by the Visa once again, and Zar was brought in as a sub. However, his playstyle just weren't suitable to the team, and Revenant was swept by both SK and Elevate. By the way, I'm not blaming the loss on Zar, but Zar plays the best as a controller and contrary to Sergeant, who is more like an offensive threat. But this performance by Revenant made many people feel like they weren't a strong team. And by the way, I was one of the many who did not believe in Revenant. But in the most recent LCQs, we were all proven wrong. In set 1 against Inner Circle, Sergeant's Shrunk was just completely shocking, to be honest. I thought Trunk was a useless brawler, but Sergeant somehow made it look so good. And after the set win, Revenant would double down and also grab set number 2. However, Inner Circle won't just get swept by Revenant, as they were then able to win the following 2 sets to bring back the match 2-2.
And not just that, not just any set, no, it's set number 5 incoming. Is this the reverse sweep? Is this the crusher of dreams for revenantXSpark?
But when it mattered the most, it was again him that stepped up.
It's not good. Whoa! Now he's caught in spawn versus Mebius and Nob. Is he gonna jump away? Well, he's got crazy dodges. Now Nob's getting threatened from above. What? Sergeant, you're in a 1v2 and you just came out on top. Has that confidence to know that he can go deep and still not have to run away. He's gonna lure them into the poison. So intelligent from Sergeant on this Angelo. Now poisoning Nob. He's down to his final life. X9J with the elimination. Brahma gone as well. revenantXSpark completely wiped the floor.
Revenant barely wins 3-2, and in the next match, he'll be up against my glorious King Tensai. And well, it's sad to say, but Revenant again takes the W. A double 3-2 win back-to-back qualifies them to day 3, and their last opponents were Rival Esports, a strong foe who just knocked out Toxic Lotus. Many of us thought that this was gonna be a close match, but Revenant somehow pulls off a 3-0 win against Rival. And with that win, Sergeant has again qualified to Worlds after 2 long years. And I asked about his thoughts on the competition, and here's what he replied. But anyways, I hope Revenant a good run in the upcoming World Finals. And also a big shout out to Sergeant and Peri for helping with the video. Anyways, that wraps this video up, and you should subscribe to the channel.